After 2 rounds in the National Off-Road Series, Cliff Barker and Mike Redden lead the production vehicle category. Stanley Illman and Frans Stangl lead the special vehicle category, and Christo van der Merwe the quad racer class. On the bike front, Richard Manning leads the 200 class, Darrell Curtis the 250 class, and Rian van Niekerk the 500 category. The South African Off-Road Championship is again developing into one of the most competitive categories in South African motorsport. The season opened with the Rustenburg 400, with Stanley Illman and Frans Stangl in the Carrera Motors Porsche pulling off a resounding victory in the special vehicle category. In sweltering conditions, Illman and Stangl fought off challenges from the Sulvort brothers, Herman and Karl-Heinz, the father and son team of Frans Chepek Sr. and Jr., and Rob Walk in the single-seater Superpave Raceco. The production vehicle category saw Springbok pair Cassie Coetzee and Richard Leek power their way to victory in the Castrol Toyota Hilux. This category is ultra-competitive, but Coetzee and Leek are in devastating form to come in ahead of Arpi Reneke and Wiley Harrington in the Bankfin Toyota Land Cruiser, and reigning South African champions Cliff Barker and Mike Redden in the Video Sport SVM Land Rover. There was an upset in the motorcycle category, with Yuri Human scoring his first national championship victory to take overall honours and the 500 class. Pre-race favourite Alfie Cox came in second overall and won the 250 class, and immediately left for overseas to campaign in the European World Enduro Championship. Top honours in the 200 class went to Natal Springbok Richard Manning on the dealer team Yamaha. Round 2 of the championship moved to the Northwest Province Milliefields for the Barbaspan 500, with the race running into controversy. Provisional results gave the special vehicle category to the brother and sister team of Marius and Margie Bourain in the Toyota Raceco. They finished ahead of Botswana crew JJ Volmerans and Steve Cooper, but a protest against the Bourains for a technical infringement still has to be judged by controlling body AA Motorsport. There was no controversy in the production vehicle category, which went to Springbok Arpi Reneke, with his wife Thelma doing the navigating. Reneke farms in the area and is a Barbaspan specialist, scoring his second successive production vehicle category win on home territory. The Renekes brought the Bankfin Toyota Land Cruiser home ahead of Cliff Barker and Mike Redden in the Video Sports SVM Land Rover. The Barbaspan ended in tragedy for Yuri Human. Well in control of the race, Human crashed less than 20 kilometers from the finish. The unfortunate Human was taken to hospital with a broken leg and is likely to be out of action for the rest of the season. With Alfie Cox still overseas, Yuri Human's accident opened the way for Springbok Errol Dalton to score his first overall victory for a number of seasons. There was consolation for the Human family when Yuri's brother Henny came in a creditable 4th overall to win the 200 class on the Lesotho Office Equipment Kawasaki. Yuri Human's accident also opened the way for Rian van Niekerk to win the 500 class. The Quad Racer Brigade have national championship status for the second year and provide some spectacular racing. Wikus van Deventer won the opening race of the season, the Rustenburg 400. The Barbaspan 500 again saw van Deventer take the flag. Last season he scored a comfortable win in the event, but was later disqualified for a technical infringement. Van Deventer leads his class in the Quad Championship. The Bell Sugarveld 400 was based at Aston, with reigning South African special vehicle champions Herman and Karl-Heinz Sulvort looking for their first win of the season. A tight course took a heavy toll, with early leaders Derek Pinoy and Hilton Levy among the early casualties. Nardus Alberts and Peter Mathieu were among the frontrunners in the Rapsa Raceco, before also being forced into early retirement. The father and son team of Frans Chepek Sr. and Jr. decided on a safety-first policy in the V Motors Raceco and weren't taking any chances in the early stages. It was a strategy also being followed by Natal crew John Rowe and Nick Fitch. Botswana crew JJ Volmerans and Steve Cooper have been consistent challengers this season and were looking for another good result. There was also a strong showing in the early stages from Harry Roscoe in the Protea Playing Cards Raceco, while Bucks and Richard Carolyn shared the driving in another single-seater. Who was to drive, when and where, was settled in brotherly fashion.
Fourth place saw the Sulwalt brothers still looking for their first win of the season, while the Carolins came through with a late charge to claim third place in the lubrication equipment race code. Brother and sister Marius and Margie Beaurain dropped out of the lead when they lost time parked on top of a rock. And it was the Chepex, Francina and Junior, who took the overall win in the special vehicle category. Championship leader Vickers van Tierventer was a hot favourite to win the quad racer category. Enjoying national championship status for the second year, the Quad Brigade are a breed apart and provide for some tremendous action. With Van Tierventer falling by the wayside, Derek Johnson came in 10 minutes ahead of Paul Breckel, with Yuri Duplessis in third place. Local crew Neil Woolrich and Paul Vermark and the Sani Motorsport Nissan were the production vehicle category pace setters throughout the Bell Sugar Belt 400. Woolrich and Vermark opened up an early lead over reigning South African champions Cliff Barker and Mike Redden in the Video Sport SVM Land Rover in a class that is highly competitive. Springbok Arpi Reinecker and new navigator Robin Houghton in the Bankfin Toyota Land Cruiser slotted into third place for much of the event. Springbok's Cassie Coetzee and Richard Leek were forced to make up time in the Castrol Toyota Hilux after a roll in the time trial, while Ralph and Ray Henderson dominated Class F in a 4. Neil Woolrich and Paul Vermark made history when they gave the Sani Motorsport Nissan its first national championship win. Woolrich also joined a select band who've won off-road events on 2 and 4 wheels. Cliff Barker and Mike Redden in the Video Sport SVM Land Rover consolidated their championship lead via second place. In a gutsy performance, the Coetzee Leek Castrol Toyota Hilux came through to take third place. They moved up a slot when Reinecker and Houghton lost time with a blocked fuel pipe, hampering the Bankfin Toyota Land Cruiser's progress. In the motorcycle section, fourth overall gave Yamaha dealer team star Richard Manning the 125 class honours ahead of Alex Vowles on the Anthel X Dairy Kawasaki. A maiden overall win and the 250 class went to Daryl Curtis on the Pro Action AGA Panasonic KTM ahead of Gavin Nimmo on a privately entered Kawasaki. Curtis finished just 34 seconds ahead of second-placed Errol Dalton on the Shimwells Yamaha. Riding with a broken shoulder blade not yet properly healed, Dalton faded over the last 80 kilometres but took the 500 class ahead of Brian Finike.
To 1,000 deadweight. After the traditional short time trial to determine starting positions, it was an early morning start for the competitors in the four-wheel car category, led away by Richard Carolyn in the lubrication equipment race code. It wasn't long before drama struck, with pre-race favourites Cassie Coetzee and Richard Leek in their Castrol Toyota Hilux grinding to a halt in the dry riverbed. Fresh from a top 10 finish in the Castrol International Rally, it was a bitter blow for the veteran pair when they suffered a terminal gearbox problem. The body language said it all. Thick sand caused plenty of trouble, and there were class battles throughout the field. This is Rashid and Hazim Noble, sandwiched between the two Class E Toyota Hiluxes of Shumi van Vuren and Svani Kotze, and Niels Lemmer and Frans Skutter. While the Noble brothers and van Vuren and Kotze had no trouble, Lemmer and Skutter had to revert to Plan B to get over the obstacle. The quad category has now had national championship status for 2 years and is growing in popularity. Out in front in this category was Western Transvaaler Vickers van Tierventer on a Yamaha, who'd opened up a commanding lead right from the start over Francois Smith. These machines demand exceptional skill, and it looks much easier than it really is. In the motorcycle category, a flying Daryl Curtis on the Pro Action AGA Panasonic KTM. Fresh from a maiden national victory in the Bell Sugar Belt 400, moved into the lead soon after the start and looked intent on quickly grinding the opposition into the dust. The 250 championship class leader was being chased by Bloemfontein rider Graham McLachlan on his Lesotho Office Equipment Honda, with Gavin Nimmo on a privately entered Kawasaki slotting into third place. Nimmo wasn't pushing as hard as Curtis or McLachlan, and sneaking up on him was Errol Dalton on the big Honda 500. The big machine had an advantage in the thick sand, but Dalton was still struggling with a shoulder injury. Behind Dalton, a group of riders that included Rian van Niekerk and Grant Bloomfield on 500 machines, and 200 class leader Henny Human was struggling in the thick sand. For Human, in particular, it was tough going on the little 125cc Honda. In the car category, brothers Hermann and Karl-Heinz Solwalt in their Solwalt Transport Raceco took the early lead. They are the reigning special vehicle champions, but were looking for their first win of the season. The Solwalt brothers like nothing more than to set the early pace and let everyone else do the chasing. Behind them, a determined Api Reineke and Robin Houghton in their Bangfin Toyota Land Cruiser tried to make up for lost time during the pre-race time trial when they had numerous punctures. They had to start 38th overall, but were now literally scything their way through the field. With Reineke reveling in the conditions, the pair had worked their way into the top 10 and had moved ahead of their arch rivals, Cliff Barker and Mike Redden, in the Video Sport SVM Land Rover. While Reineke and Houghton were flying where the surface was solid, further up the field, Nardus Alberts and Peter Mathieu were having a hard time holding off Bucks Carolyn. These two vehicles were now second and third overall, respectively, but with an optional refuel point coming up, the pressure was on Alberts. Bucks Carolyn had decided to drive in their dust, since he had to concentrate on both driving and navigating in the single-seater Raceco, and having someone to do the pathfinding for him was worth the discomfort. Bucks was scheduled to hand over the driving duties to his brother, Richard. In the production vehicle category, the Video Sport SVM Range Rover of Arthur Abraham, making his desert race debut, and Stratford Vogt was just outside the top 10 and struggling with handling problems. With a tough day drawing to a close, Ulrich Murray was steadily working his way through the motorcycle field on his KTM. Behind Murray, a flying Brian Bontekoning was also still looking in fine trim on his Yamaha and was making a late charge. Section 1 took the competitors on a 562-kilometre route to Lepepe in southeastern Botswana for an overnight stop. And at the end of day 1, the Toyota 1000 Desert Race had claimed many of the early frontrunners. The first car across the finish line on day 1 was the V Motors Raceco of Franz Czepek, senior and junior. Special vehicles dominated the top 10, but in a tremendous performance, Api Reineke and Robin Houghton were second across the line and led the production vehicle category. Errol Dalton was leading the motorcycle category by 15 minutes, while Vickers van Deventer was the leading quad racer with a gap of almost an hour over Francois Smit. Franz Czepek Senior and Junior led the field away on day 2 of one of the toughest Toyota 1000 desert races in the history of the event. Section 2 would take the survivors from Lepepe back to Gaborone, but as always, there would be a sting in the tail. With a comfortable lead in the production vehicle category, and with the Toyota 1000 counting double points towards the championship, Api Reineke and Robin Houghton were out to consolidate an already strong position. The Solwalt brothers, Hermann and Karl-Heinz, needing no urging to go as fast as they could. They had plenty of ground to make up after running into a problem with their power steering system the previous day and losing a lot of time repairing it with borrowed spare parts from other teams. Cliff Barker and Mike Redden in their Land Rover also had a lot of ground to make up after suffering a string of punctures the previous day, and the reigning production vehicle champions were not only hoping that something would go wrong with the frontrunners, but were also trying to pick up as many championship points as possible. Having had a good, consistent drive in their Raceco on day 1, Nardus Alberts and Peter Mathieu were looking at a good finish. But it was not to be, as they had to withdraw later in the race. Running in their dust and trying hard to make up for lost time due to various problems the previous day was Richard Carolyn in the Lubrication Equipment Raceco. Not having driven the previous day, Carolyn was having navigational problems, but on corrected time was right up with the leaders. Errol Dalton on his Honda was still comfortably leading the motorcycle category, despite a heavy fall shortly after the start, which, according to his own admission, cleared some cobwebs from his mind. Henny Human was still giving chase on the little 125cc Honda, but unless something untoward happened, didn't have much chance of catching Dalton. In the quad racer category, it was virtually all over bar the shouting. Paul Breckel was running in second place, more than an hour behind Vickers van Deventer. Behind Breckel came Gavin Nimmo, who'd been a strong contender for 250 class honours throughout the race. Nimmo then dropped 8 minutes behind Graham McLachlan after the organisers scrapped a section of the motorcycle route because of a mix-up over the positioning of a refuel point. The Toyota 1000 Desert Race produced its customary sting in the tail, with a gearbox problem slowing down Franz Czepek Senior and Junior. Api Reineke and Robin Houghton were now first on the road, despite having lost four-wheel drive. This forced them to ease their pace in order to score maximum points, which allowed Greg Harvey and Lionel Acton, having driven an impressive race, to come into contention. Behind the Harvey Acton car, Richard Carolyn was also pushing hard, and the 1995 Toyota 1000 Desert Race was set for a grandstand finish. The Carolyn brothers won the special vehicle category from Harvey and Acton. R.P. Reinicker and Robin Houghton took the production vehicle category, while Errol Dalton won in the motorcycle category. Vickers van Deventer walked the quad racer class. The Stanek Group N Brigade joined the other Nick Haddon in their Fiat Uno.
It was the scene of round 5 of the South African Off-Road Championship, the Queen Motorspares Settler 400. The father and son combination of Franz Czepek Sr. and Jr., leading the Special Vehicle Championship, were looking for a good finish to consolidate their lead. Henry Whittam-Lloyd and Rian van der Walt in their Sadmaster had an impressive run, while Herbie Smith in his Mighty Mag, powered by a motorcycle engine, was chasing Rene Lloyd and Owen Tutton for a place in the top 10. Bux Carolyn and Greg Wiebel gave their lubrication equipment Madiba a good debut, but ran into suspension problems later in the event while out in front. Botswana crew JJ Volmerans and Steve Cooper went well initially, but unfortunately couldn't finish the event. The Czepeks were running steadily and in line for their second win of the season. Championship contenders Greg Harvey and Lionel Acton were chasing the Czepek pair, a finish imperative to keep their championship hopes alive. Henry Whittam-Lloyd and Rian van der Walt were at this stage still leading Herbie Smith, who was challenging for a top 5 position in his impressively turned out Mighty Mag. And Richard Carolyn in his lubrication equipment Raceco was going well before he picked up problems and had to withdraw. Moving into the lead after Bux Carolyn and Greg Wiebel ran into suspension problems, the Czepeks were starting to control the race. They'd already won the Bell Equipment Sugarbelt 400 earlier in the season and were leading Greg Harvey and Lionel Acton by just 2 points before this event. A victory would consolidate their championship lead, but they were not out of the woods yet. Lying second and chasing hard were Harvey and Acton, but there was a 4-minute gap between them and the leaders. They were trying all they could to close that gap. In the quad racer category, Vickers van Deventer on his Pro Group Security Yamaha Banshee soon took a stranglehold on the race. Derek Johnson on the dealer team Yamaha was lying second, but couldn't match van Deventer for pace. Johnson was gradually pulling away from Paul Breckel on the Brasco Refrigeration Yamaha Banshee, while Yuri Duplessis slotted into 4th place on his Gap Racing Banshee, about 8 minutes further back. Kevin Pereira and Christo van der Merwe were going along steadily, but the pair were now over an hour behind race leader Vickers van Deventer, who was showing his class and sprinting away from the rest of the field. The quads provide for some spectacular racing and have national championship status for the 2nd year in a row. At the Aldo Scribanti circuit in Port Elizabeth, Vickers van Deventer showed why he is the dominant force at the moment. In the production vehicle category, Natal crew Neil Woolidge and Paul Vermaak in their turbocharged Nissan Sani were hoping to repeat their victory in the Sugarbelt 400. Woolidge is one of the few off-road competitors to have won national events on both 2 and 4 wheels. Cassie Coetzee and Richard Leek in their Castrol Toyota Hilux were not taking any risks, with reliability problems hampering their championship progress this season. They were soon engaged in a huge battle with championship leaders R.P. Reinicker and Robin Houghton. Reinicker and Houghton in their Bankfin Toyota Land Cruiser took the lead early on, and although they'd only teamed up midway through the season, the partnership has already produced some impressive performances. Reigning production vehicle champion Cliff Barker was teamed up with Edward Salzwedel in the Video Sport SVM Land Rover, but the pair were battling with an engine misfire and wouldn't finish the event. The Video Sport SVM Range Rover of Arthur Abraham and Stratford Vogt underwent a major rebuild prior to the Settler 400, but unfortunately this pair would also feature among the non-finishers. With wife Elby sitting alongside him in the Toyota Hilux, championship contender Niels Lemmer took early control of Class E. The Lemmers were being chased by Ralph and Ray Henderson in the Printers Roller Services Ford Bucky, with the pair making all the running in Class F. Botswana crew Paul Jonker and Mike Allen in the aging Nissan Safari were making steady progress and leading Class D. Local crew Newton Love and Colin Pote in a Nissan Safari were chasing Neil Woolidge and Paul Vermaak. Local knowledge is always an advantage on off-road events, But on this occasion, it didn't do anything for Love and Post, who managed to roll the Nissan. The battle between Cassie Coetzee and Richard Leake in their Castrol Hilux and R.P. Reinecker and Robin Houghton in their Bankford Land Cruiser was extremely tight, with only 3 seconds separating the crews after racing Section 1. Reinecker and Houghton knew the race would be won or lost on corrected time and were going as fast as they could to try and build up a cushion. Pre-race favourite Darrell Curtis on the Pro Action AGA Panasonic KTM set the early pace in the motorcycle category. Right up with Curtis in the opening stages was Alex Vowles, running at the head of the 200 class on the Antilex Dairy Kawasaki. 500 class championship leader Rian van Niekerk on the PD Motorcycles Honda looked to be in a spot of bother and was soon overtaken by Graham McLaughlin on the Lesotho Office Equipment Honda. The pair were being chased by Errol Dalton on the Lesotho Office Equipment Honda and Kevin Fisher on a privately entered Kawasaki. In the 200 class, Alex Vowles was gradually opening up a sizable lead over an Italian, Lance Trethewey. Vowles was emerging as a challenger for overall honours, something which doesn't often happen with riders on 200cc machines in national championship events. Toyota 1000 Desert Race winner Errol Dalton was going along well early on, but a tyre problem saw him gradually slip down the field to eventually finish a disappointing 16th. Dalton was soon overtaken by eventual overall winner Darrell Curtis, who gradually built up a 9-minute gap over Rian van Niekerk and Alex Vowles. In the production vehicle category, Cassie Coetzee and Richard Leake took their second win of the season, only 33 seconds ahead of R.P. Reinecker and Robin Houghton. The Chepex also won the special vehicle category for the second time this year. Nobody could catch Darrell Curtis in the motorcycle category, and in the quads, Vickers van Deventer won by a wide margin. The sixth round of the
The sixth and penultimate round of the South African Off-Road Championship, the Caledon 400, took competitors to the peaceful Eastern Free State town of Beffena. Leading the production vehicle field from the outset were Cassie Coetzee and Richard Leake in their Castrol Toyota Hilux, with Cliff Barger and Mike Redden in the Video Sport SVM Land Rover chasing in the early stages. Champions-elect R.P. Reinecker and Robin Houghton in their Bankford Toyota Land Cruiser were maintaining a steady pace in third position, while Bell Equipment Sugarbelt 400 winners Neil Woolridge and Paul Vermark in their time-freight Nissan Sani were pushing hard in fourth. In the quad category, Northwest farmer Vickers van Deventer on his Pro Group Security Yamaha Banshee continued his dominance of the past season, opening up a huge lead early in the race. Trying to keep up with van Deventer was Derek Johnson on his Yamaha dealer team Banshee. While Yuri Duplessis on his Team Gap Racing Banshee was trying to close the gap between himself and Johnson. Enjoying championship status for the second year in a row, quad racing is both fast and spectacular. Paul Breckles' Brasco refrigeration Yamaha Banshee was in fourth position. In the special vehicle category, Bucks Carolyn and Don Vale led the field in their lubrication equipment Madiba. Natal crew Derek Pinoy and Hilton Laurie were in hot pursuit of the Gauteng pair, with Nardus Alberts and Peter Mathieu in the Rapsa Raceco third on the road and looking to continue their recent good form. Rustenburg 400 winners Stan Illman and Franz Stangl also finished the London to Mexico rally earlier this year and were back off-road racing in their Shell Raceco. In the motorcycle category, local boy Graham McLaughlin on the Lesotho Office Equipment Honda 250 was into an early lead. Doing the chasing was Errol Dalton on the Lesotho Office Equipment Honda running in the 500 class, who kept up the pressure throughout the race. The Caledon 400 saw the return of Sugarbelt 400 winner Yuri Human on his Lesotho Office Equipment Honda 250, who was seriously injured earlier in the season, and he was being chased by Darrell Curtis on a Pro Action AGA Panasonic KTM. Brian Bontekoning on the Shimwells Antilex Dairy Yamaha 250 was being chased in the early stages of the race by 500 championship leader Rian van Niekerk on his PD Motorcycles Honda. Van Niekerk was leading Kevin Fisher and Errol Dalton in the championship before the Caledon 400. The route was a tough one for the motorcyclists, but produced some close racing in battles for overall and the various class honours. Back in the production vehicle category, there's been a change in the running order, with Neil Woolrich and Paul Vermaak in the time freight Sani now in front. They had a trouble-free run and looked well on their way to their second national championship victory. Early leaders Cassie Coetzee and Richard Leake in their Castrol Toyota Hilux had a puncture and lost about 4 minutes in the process, enough time to fall back into second position. They were chasing hard to try to make up the lost ground. Behind Coetzee and Leake was the Banklin Toyota Land Cruiser of Api Reineke and Robin Houghton, the pair driving more than eye on winning the championship than winning the race. After running into brake problems, the Cliff Barker Mike Redden Videosport SVM Land Rover was steadily losing ground, and they found themselves fifth on the road, behind Class E leaders Niels and Elby Lemmer in the Toyota Hilux. Meanwhile, in the quad category, Vickers van Deventer on the Pro Security Yamaha Banshee was still pulling away from the rest of the field. The flying van Deventer was again demonstrating the overwhelming superiority he's built up this season. In second position was the Gap Racing Banshee of Yuri Duplessis, almost half an hour behind the leader. Duplessis had taken over second place from Derek Johnson and was slowly but steadily opening up a good gap between second and third. Reigning special vehicle champions, the brothers Herman and Karl-Heinz Sulwalt in their Sulwalt Transport Raceco were driving a storming race, having had to start from the middle of the field. They've not had a happy season and were looking for their first win. Going into the Caledon 400 with a 10-point championship lead, Franz Čepek Senior and Junior in their V Motors Raceco needed a finish to keep their championship hopes alive, but were starting to lose ground to the leading bunch of cars. Initial leaders Bucks Carolyn and Don Vale in the lubrication equipment Madiba had lost ground through mechanical gremlins and were trying hard to make it up. Derek Pinoy and Hilton Laurie in their Raceco took over the lead on corrected time after the Sulwalt brothers, who were lying first, were hit with a 15-minute penalty for a technical infringement. This also benefited Nardus Alberts and Peter Mathieu in their Rapsa Raceco, who slotted into second position ahead of the Sulwalts. Stan Illman and Franz Stangl were having a good run in the Shell Raceco, but behind them a good scrap had developed for fourth and fifth between the single-seaters of Richard Carolyn in the lubrication equipment Raceco, Stealth Bomber, and Harry Roscoe in the Protea Playing Cards Raceco. Although the elder of the Carolyn brothers was going as steadily as ever, fourth place and honours in the battle of the single-seaters eventually went to Roscoe. Sixth position belonged to Greg Harvey and Lionel Acton in the Queen Motorspares Raceco. From their point of view, the important thing was to finish ahead of Franz Čepek Senior and Junior to keep them in the championship dice. Back in the bike category, local boy Graham McLaughlin on the Lesotho Office Equipment Honda was still leading, but his lead was a tenuous one, and there was danger looming behind in the form of his Lesotho Office Equipment teammate Errol Dalton on the big 500cc Honda. Dalton could see McLaughlin clearly, but he also had to watch his back, with Daryl Curtis on his Pro Action AGA Panasonic KTM closing in. All three riders were in sight of each other in what was building up to a terrific finish. Out in front in the 200 class was Henny Human on the Lesotho Office Equipment Honda. He would ultimately lose the lead to eventual class winner Clayton Enslin on the PD Motorcycles Kawasaki. Behind him, Yuri Human was feeling his way along after his long layoff and looked pleased enough simply to be back on a bike. Woolrich and Vermaak notched up their second national championship victory, and for Reineke, his second place was enough to clinch the Drivers' Championship. Houghton will have to finish ahead of Richard Leake in the final race for the Navigators' title. Pinoy and Laurie won the special vehicle category with the 1995 title far from settled, while both Dalton and Curtis eventually passed McLaughlin in the motorcycle category. Van Deventer had no problems in the quad category.